I mean, even Nevada's head coach acknowledged that Penn State is elite going into this season. This game should be over well before the final whistle.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to Penn State football, and thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. My name is Zach Seyko, and I am your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. Chris Murray, Nevada expert. He's been on the show before. He is returning to talk about what Nevada is going to bring to the football field and what changes they've made in total roster overhaul for this offseason. So we're going to discuss that more because could the Wolfpack somewhat make this interesting? It is a lofty spread. So in this opening segment, we are going to talk about the Penn State side of it, in particular, how they're going to approach this Nevada matchup and why you should be very confident that the Nittany Lions will take care of business. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Friendly reminder to let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Thank you to all the everydayers out there. So Penn State going into week one, this is a team that is bringing back so much consistency, continuity from the previous season. Starting quarterback, both starting running backs, a bulk of the offensive line. You could argue that it's the entire offensive line with Anthony Donko starting at right tackle at one point and then Nolan Rucci. You were bringing back 5 former starters from a season ago, even though they all didn't play together at one point in time. That's the foundation of a national championship caliber team, an elite team, which is the way that Jeff Choate, Nevada head coach, described them to open up his press conference. He also said that James Franklin does not get enough credit, that this program overall has gone from very good to elite. That is high praise. It is due praise for a Nittany Lions team that is looking to capitalize off of a top 4 finish from a season ago. Remember, they lost in the college football playoff semifinals to Notre Dame. So this is a team that brings back that core, that nucleus, and then adds to it Jim Knowles at defensive coordinator. That is an upgrade over Tom Allen. It's not only about the talent they retained, it's also the upgrades they made. Stan Drayton at the running backs coach spot. Okay, you lose Jaywan Sider pretty late in the offseason, and that's an upgrade. Then you go into the transfer portal. You get a starting caliber linebacker in Amari Campbell. You get Trevor Pena in the spring transfer portal window. But let's not forget that Kyron Hudson, Devontae Ross at wide receiver, 2 guys that will definitely contribute, in addition to bringing King Mack back, who's going to rotate in pretty frequently at that safety spot. Even though he didn't win the starting job anywhere, he's going to play a lot of snaps on this defense and rotate in and out as a versatile defensive back. So I want to set the foundation here for anybody that's missed the Penn State previews that this is a top 3 team in the country. Nevada, I kind of feel sorry for them. This is obviously not an ideal matchup for a team that is looking to avoid a double-digit loss season. They're looking to get to a bowl game. This is going to be a massive reality check here. We'll see how they ultimately fare. So when Penn State has the football and when Penn State's trying to defend Nevada, it's not necessarily going to be easy, but they're just able to outmatch the Wolfpack. They're going to be able to lean on the ground game. I expect the blueprint, the game plan to be fairly vanilla. You might see the passing attack open up a little bit, but not too much. We know that Devontae Ross is dealing with an injury, and he's been dealing with it all off season, so he hasn't been able to practice in full capacity, but he should be available for this game against Nevada. You also don't want to risk his longevity. With that being said, you're going to see more conservative play calling from Andy Kotelnicki. You can get creative, and I think they will get creative with potentially 6 or 7 offensive linemen. James Franklin talked about that in his press conference. We could see more tight end usage in this game. You have Khalil Dinkins, you have Luke Reynolds, you have Andrew Rapplier. All these guys are capable tight ends, and honestly, I am still a believer in the likes of a Joey Schlaffer. I think Joey Schlaffer is a complimentary tight end, but somebody that can still play. You have that depth. He is a depth piece. But Penn State should be running the football. When Devontae Ross is fully healthy, that's where you really want to try to work in. But Trevor Pena, Kyron Hudson, honestly, even with Khalil Dinkins being the new starter and Luke Reynolds and Andrew Rapplier getting more involvement in the offense, this is still a very new passing attack. You want to build that rapport if you're Drew Allar. So you will see them testing the waters a little bit, but nothing extreme. Nothing that's going to go really deep into the playbook because you don't have to. Now, Andy Kotelnicki, James Franklin have talked about how it's really not worth saving anything. That's coach speak. There is a playbook specific to every opponent. You don't want to show all of the cards in your hand. But at that same time, you do want to build that rapport. However, this is a game that will be out of reach very quickly. So on offense, Penn State's going to run the ball a lot. You can expect 50, maybe even 60 carries. You'll see Nicholas Singleton. You'll see Kaytron Allen. You'll see some combination of Cam Wallace, Quentin Martin, Corey Smith. They're going to use a lot of running backs, not only for this game, but this season. And winning teams run the football more. So expect both Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen to at least have over 100 yards. That is a safe play. We'll see who ultimately gets heavily involved in the passing game. Like I said, I think they'll test some waters. Trevor Pena should be a focal point in the passing game since he is healthy and since he came in a little later in the cycle. You want to try to get him going with Drew Allar as soon as possible. Over on the defensive side of things, now, and I also want to point out that Nevada's run defense isn't exactly the best. That's probably their weakest point is the front seven when defending against the run. So Penn State, being the run first team that it is, and being one of the better running teams in the entire country, is going to have its way with the Nevada defense. Then when Penn State's on defense, Jim Knowles is going to get aggressive, and this defense is going to be naturally aggressive all season long. But Chubba Purdy, who's going to be the starting quarterback for Nevada this season, he's a run-first quarterback, doesn't really have the most accurate arm. He has the arm strength. He's just an overall athlete. He's a talented athlete, hasn't quite put together the mechanics, the nuances of being a total comprehensive football player. But he can run. He can run. So what do you do against Nevada? You stack the box. You put 8 in the box, maybe even play 9. Nevada's offensive line is not going to be able to hold up against the likes of Denai Dennis-Sutton, Zane Durant, Alonzo Ford, Xavier Gilliam, Zariah Fisher, Chaz Coleman, true freshman who's getting a lot of recognition this training camp. Penn State's front four should be able to get pressure organically. They're not going to have to dial up any blitzes, but you also want to take away that option read and just force Nevada to throw the football. And Purdy's not going to be able to sit back in the pocket. And yes, for those wondering, this is, yes, Brock Purdy's brother. But Chubba, not really the best passer. You get some pressure on him. He can ad-lib, use a quarterback spy. So I expect the starters to vacate the field well before you'll start seeing it probably halfway through the third quarter. You still want to get these guys reps, though. Game reps, live reps, not just practice reps here. Capitalize on a matchup where you can focus on the little things against Nevada. So this one, I'll save my score prediction for later in the show. We give our score predictions. Chris and I talk about that later in the show. But I do want to give clarity that this is a comfortable Penn State win. I would say if you're looking to wager on anything from a betting angle, Penn State first half spread is probably your best bet in that situation because this is a team that returns so much. Nevada doesn't really return anything. It's completely brand new for Jeff Choate in year 2. So it's just not an ideal matchup for the Wolfpack. And with the help of Chris Murray, from Nevada Sportsnet. We're going to break it down even further, the X's and O's, what to know about this Nevada team that has so much turnover. So can they pull off a surprise and cover the spread? Or, as some people are asking, about the magnitude of the possibility of an upset. Well, we're going to get all into all of that and more coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth. Whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments, and when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface. On your laptop or on your phone, Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you put off organizing your finances, Monarch is there for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel like you're in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. With Monarch Money, you can now identify what you are and are not saving. If you haven't been saving as much as you thought, Monarch is able to identify that. Monarch helps you notice an inefficient investment allocation, and you can discover 401ks from past jobs. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's right. That's 50% off your first year over at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONCollege. And today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is almost here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. That's right, $300. FanDuel allows you to make every game even more exciting. Whether you're watching your favorite team or you're just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup, it's quick, it's easy, it's the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. And if you're thinking you're confident in Penn State football bet, season totals, upcoming game against Nevada, you can make bets on Penn State as well through FanDuel. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. And if it wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. Hey, before we get back to the podcast, we have an important request for you. Locked On wants to hear from all of you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcasts even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't like, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to LockedOnPodcasts.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered in for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that is LockedOnPodcasts.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. Thanks so much for helping us out. And help me welcome back the Nevada expert himself, Chris Murray from Nevada Sportsnet. Links to his work will be down in the description. Highly encourage all of you to go check them out. Leading up to this, if you want more information about this Penn State-Nevada matchup. But Chris, let's begin with a variety of different things just about what has stood out about Nevada through training camp, because this is something James Franklin actually pointed out in the press conference, and the numbers aren't exact, but he said 54 players, 54 new players are on this Nevada team. The total could be actually past 60. So how do you even build any sort of chemistry or know what sense of direction this Wolfpack team is headed in?
Well, yeah, you generally don't want that entering a second season. So this is Jeff Choate's second season. So that first year, you kind of would assume that you're going to have that roster turnover, that tumultuous kind of change on some people buying in, some people not buying in. But this is entering year two, and you're seeing this kind of change. So I think that led to a lot of position battles during training camp, just because there are only 4 returning starters. So there were not a lot of jobs that were solidified heading into fall camp. And then, just the work that they've tried to do since the summer. I mean, Jeff Choate, even in the spring, said, I don't put a ton of stock into this because this isn't going to be my roster when we take the field at Penn State. They didn't really assume that they had their roster until halfway through summer when the high school kids got here, when that second wave of 20-plus players went into the portal after spring camp. So they've had to try and throw everything together really, really quickly. You throw in the fact that their offensive line coach and run game coordinator also was dismissed halfway through fall camp, and that adds in another wrinkle in there. So, there's going to be a work in progress early in the season. You see this with a lot of programs. UNLV, which is a program also in the state of Nevada, almost loses to Idaho State in the week 0 game when there are super high expectations. But they had a new coach who brought in 60-plus new players as well. And you're not going to be what you're going to be at the end of November in week 1 or week 0. So, I think there's been a lot of work Nevada's put into this season, but certainly there's still a lot to figure out once the season begins because there are so many new faces in so many places.
And when we get into the final segment, talking about the spread and the total and everything, it's interesting from the perspective of, you bring up UNLV, for example, how that chemistry, that rapport, the team that they're going to be isn't quite there yet. You could apply the same standard to Nevada, but James Franklin framed it as, well, we don't really have a book on them, so to speak. We really don't have a read on them because there are so many variables that we can't account for, and we have to evaluate them individually. So let's continue with that, Chris. Any individual standouts from training camp? Obviously, Chubba Purdy is definitively the starter. There really wasn't a battle there or anything, but this team is going to focus on that run identity. This is going to be a run-heavy team because they have the assets, but also because they don't want to get into situations where they force a shootout against teams that they can't keep up with toe-to-toe. So generally speaking, and then some individuals that have stood out, what has really caught your eye through training camp with Nevada?
Well, I think it's just good news for Nevada that Chubba Purdy got through camp healthy, because this guy's had surgery on a broken collarbone. He's had double groin surgery. He's had a broken ankle. He had shoulder soreness last fall camp. They really knocked him out of the running to win the starting job. So the fact that he's made it to the season opener and he's feeling good in terms of his health is a win for the Wolfpack. I mean, you look at his history. This is his 6th college season, 2 at Florida State, 2 at Nebraska, now 2 at Nevada. He started 6 games in his college career, 0-6, with his team averaging just 13 points per game in those games. So I think he's got a lot to prove in terms of his ability to get the ball down the field. He is an elite athlete. He is going to make plays with his legs, both scripted and unscripted. They obviously don't want him taking too many hits with that injury history, but can he be efficient throwing the ball? Can he convert key third downs? And can he then stretch the field? Because you look at his average yards per attempt, and it's a really low figure as well, right around 5. So that's the big thing that I think you did see some progress from him, and I think he's feeling comfortable entering the season. At running back, I think Herschel Turner Jr. really stood out. This is a kid in the Bay Area, grew up in California, more than 3,000 yards, 42 touchdowns his senior season. Last year was a true freshman at Utah State. He averaged more than 5 yards per carry and was a really quality player. He's probably going to be your lead back. And then in terms of the wide receiver core, a guy named Jordan Brown. He's a transfer from Texas Tech. Before that, he was at Kansas. Not the biggest guy, but I think he had a really good camp as well. I think Nevada's going to be counting on him to be arguably their top pass catcher. And then I think tight end's a big one. You're going to see, I think, a lot of 2 tight end from Nevada to try and be as physical as possible. Jace Henry was a starter for the Wolfpack last year, broke his ankle in the 4th game of the season against Minnesota. So, him coming back, I think, will help the run game. And then they added an Eastern Washington transfer named Jet Carpenter, who seems like he's been a really big piece of the offense in the locker room. So from the offensive perspective, those are kind of the guys to look out for. Those are the guys who are going to have to play well if Nevada's going to be back to a bowl this season.
Offense or defense, who's kind of winning that battle initially when they go up against one another, or just who would ultimately have the edge in deciding close games for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was pretty neutral, which Jeff Choate really liked. He, 2 scrimmages so far this spring, and he said that the offense and the defense both had their moments, which they really enjoyed. I think on the offense, there's a little bit more proven returning productivity. You look at Nevada's defense, just 1 returning starter, and it's a nose tackle who had about 25 tackles last season. So they don't really have any playmakers back on defense. Their secondary is completely brand new. They lost 2 cornerback transfers who transferred out to Power 4 schools, and then they had a safety who was drafted into the NFL. But they did, go and get a lot of guys from the portal who have played a lot of football. And that's kind of been the theme on both sides of the ball, but specifically on defense, is they went and got a bunch of guys who have played a lot of football at other schools, and they've been productive. how are they going to gel together is the big question mark there. And some of these guys did come from the FCS level as well, specifically on the offensive line. So that's a jump too. But I think if you look at like the actual experience of the team, it's not that bad. But then you look at like returning productivity year over year from your returning players is bottom 10 in the nation, both on offense and defense. So there are guys who have played football, just not together. So I think that's the whole gelling thing. Like they're not going to be, a proven product when they hit the field against Penn State, or really throughout probably the whole first month of the season in non-conference play. So, they might think they know what they're going to see, but until they actually get out there and they're playing together, I think it is a lot of unproven questions. There's not like even one position where you can be like, oh, we're fully comfortable. We know what we're going to get from this position because we've seen it here before. But I think that's probably not the best feeling when you go and play the number 2 team in the country.
Before we get to the X's and O's and the matchup itself and how to look at the spread, the total, the money line's out of the question there. But this is just a general question about Nevada's expectations. Chris, in your mind and the vibe within the program, what is the best case scenario for this Wolfpack team? What is the worst case scenario for this team? Is it 0-12? Is it just never really materializing, but you win a couple games by chance? What does that best and worst case scenario look like for Nevada and Jeff Choate in year number 2?
Well, I think they've come off 3 straight years of worst case scenario, 2-10, 2-10, 3-10. It's the worst 3-year stretch in the program's history, which goes back to the early 1900s. So the worst case scenario is another 10-loss season, which the schedule's easier than it was last year, but it's still rated as a top 3 schedule in the Mountain West. So, it's not going to be certainly a cakewalk by any means. They still have to play Western Kentucky at a conference. That's a team that scored 40-plus points in their Week 0 game against Sam Houston, and they're a very good program. They've got Boise State, UNLV, San Jose State. Those are the top 3 teams in the preseason poll. All are at Mackey, where Nevada plays. So generally you want your tougher games at home and your easier games on the road. But if you're a developing program, maybe you want those easy games at home so you have a better chance of winning them. So I think the worst case scenario, a 10-loss season, is still out there. I think best case scenario, probably 7 wins. I think Nevada wants to get to a bowl. I mean, it was in a bowl 14 out of 17 seasons from 2005 to 2021, and then they've had this 3-year stretch where everything's just kind of fallen apart. They're now on their 3rd different head coach over a 5-year period. So, trying to get back to a bowl, I think, is a reasonable expectation for this program. I think Jeff Choate, when he took over prior to last year, a lot of coaches don't say publicly what they want to achieve in a win-loss total, and he said, I want to be the most improved team in the FBS in win-loss total. This is not going to be a rebuild year. It's going to be a launch. And they didn't launch. I mean, they played better, but they still went 3-10. So if you say we're going to launch, we're not going to have a rebuild, and you go to back-to-back non-bowl seasons, you're not necessarily backing up what you publicly said you wanted your expectations to be early in your tenure. So I think getting to a bowl is huge for this program, just to try and reestablish the brand as a bowl caliber membership. And then obviously with the Mountain West changing its members after this year, 5 schools going to the Pac-12, the conference looks a lot more winnable starting in 2026. So if you can get to a bowl, maybe that is the first step to potentially winning a Mountain West championship in 2026, when your Fresno States, your Boise States, your Colorado States, Utah States, San Diego States are all in a different conference.
College football is finally back. Week 0 is in the books. Now week 1, the stage is set. Penn State hosting Nevada, 3:30 kickoff this upcoming Saturday. It's a lofty spread, but the Nittany Lions have the advantage. We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business are available to you. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting on projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. If you need parts fast for a project, Supply House has that next-day delivery. Talk about a game changer. The part finder tools and 3D schematics can save you hours on a job, where every detail matters. And their Trademaster perks like priority shipping and dedicated support make the whole process even smoother. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, low prices, and a dedicated support line at supplyhouse.com. Again, visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order over at supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. So now let's break down the matchup itself. Our friends over at FanDuel have it currently, and again, this could change, but as we sit here and have this conversation, 44.5 point spread in favor of the Nittany Lions. Ignore the money line, minus 100,000. I'm not going to tell anyone one way or another what to do with that, but that talk about lofty. And then the total is set at 57.5. So this game projects about, just to think in terms of it, that score of a 49-7 score is a realistic outcome based on what we have here. I think Penn State could score more points than that. Chris, based on what you've told me about the defense that Nevada is going to be fielding to begin, and just with what Penn State has in terms of continuity. The continuity is a big thing with Nevada, of how they don't have much. Penn State has all of it, especially on offense. The offensive line, the quarterback, 2 running backs, the offensive coordinator, which is massive for them. So 49 points in that ballpark for Penn State. I feel like they could score potentially 56, maybe 63, especially since the ground game, which is probably going to be one of the weak points for Nevada this season, is being able to stop and limit the run, and that's Penn State's bread and butter. So I'm thinking that Penn State might score 8, potentially 9 touchdowns in this one, and I'm curious to see, okay, how does Nevada counter with that? If they're a team that can't air it out consistently, can they keep up with what Penn State is doing, or is it just the clock's going to work against them, and they might even be shut out in this game?
Well, I mean, the last 2 times they played Big Ten teams, they've been shut out. Last year against Minnesota, and then you go back a couple years before that, Iowa. So the physicality that the Big Ten offers and the caliber of athlete that Penn State's going to put on the field, Nevada wants to be the most physical team on the field when it's playing Mountain West opponents. That's not going to be the case when you're playing Penn State. This is a program that gave up almost 200 rushing yards per game last year, more than 5 yards per carry. So that is number one goal for me if you are Nevada, is can you make Penn State have to throw the ball occasionally? Can you get them into 3rd and 5 or longer? Or is it going to be 7, 8, 9 yards per run? If that's the case, yeah, the game's over. Penn State's going to go put up 50. Wolfpack's not going to be in the game. Can you make them have to execute a 3rd and long offense? That's, going to be goal number one for Nevada's team, is, just being able to hold up physically enough to make things competitive. I think that's going to be the big question mark. I mean, you go to the last time Nevada played a team of this caliber in the season opener, 2023, gave up 66 points to USC and Caleb Williams. So we have seen this story before from Nevada's perspective. When you are this massive underdog on the road against an AP preseason top 10 team, and oftentimes you just get bullied to the point where you can't compete. Now you go, last year, they did play SMU in the season opener at Mackey Stadium. That is a game Nevada was leading by 9 points with less than 10 minutes to go, and then made some really silly mistakes down the stretch, including, kind of trying to fair catch a kickoff and basically giving the ball over because they didn't execute that correctly. So, I think this Penn State is better than last year's SMU, and we saw that on the field last year in the college football playoff. But if you're Jeff Choate, that's what you're telling your team. Hey, we played a college football playoff team in the season opener last year, and we had that game won before we made some mistakes. Like, why can't we do that again? Not going to be easy with that offensive continuity with Penn State, but if there's some kind of granule belief, they could just point to last year and say, they were playing a really good team and they were beating them toe to toe to start the season when maybe that team was underestimating.
And it all kind of compounds over the course of a game. If your defense is if Penn State's going to try to rattle off these 10, 12, who knows if it's going to get to 15 again. If they're breaking off chunks of yardage, I imagine it's going to be, okay, we're pretty content with 8, 9, 10 play drives. But at the same time, it's demoralizing, it's exhausting. If your offense, for the opponent, from Nevada's perspective, can't sustain a drive, they can't get across the 50-yard line, and at least just make Penn State's defense somewhat work for it, then that has that inverse effect where where the confidence, the energy in particular, you're just out there on the field time after time after time if you're Nevada's defense, and that's where the floodgates will really open, and then Penn State is breaking off those long touchdowns, whether it's because the defense is winded or just because they're simply demoralized. Like, we couldn't stop them before, and now you put us out here again. Our offense has got to help us out. Play complementary football is something that James Franklin has said, and dozens of other college football coaches have.
Yeah, which in Nevada wants to have these time grinding offensive possessions to try and minimize the number of possessions. But I don't think that that's necessarily going to work against Penn State, if we're being honest. The Wolfpack has to have these explosive plays. Are you going to go on a 10 to 12 play touchdown drive against Penn State before something self-combust? Probably not. But can you have like a 50-yard pass? Can you get Chubba Purdy out in space and he's able to, outrun a defense because he has that kind of ability? I think if the Wolfpack's going to be at the game at halftime, it needs a couple of those big chunk plays, and it can't give those up. It has to win that portion of the game, and we'll see if that happens. Like I said, there aren't any like proven playmakers on Nevada where you're like, oh, just get this guy in space and he's going to go make something great for you. They might have that on the roster. We just don't know who that is yet, and the staff probably doesn't exactly know who it is either. So we'll see if Nevada can get a couple of explosives in there early on, while the preference would be have a 7-8 minute drive. So Penn State's, not on the field as much and your defense gets a chance to rest. I just don't know how realistic that is, having watched Nevada play against some Big Ten opponents in recent years.
From Penn State's perspective, you can keep the game plan. I'm not saying they're going to intentionally hide anything, keep any plays, close to the vest. However, you can have a vanilla game plan and win this game. You can run the ball. The more you run the football, the more likely that you're winning. So if they run 60, 65 times, that's a path to victory. Again, we talks about, hey, it's breaking down Nevada's defense. This is week 1. I think Penn State will throw some wrinkles in to try to get the passing game to evolve, because that's what's new about the offense. 3 new starting wide receivers, a new starting tight end, even though he's been there for a long time. The passing game is completely different for Penn State. So you want to build that rhythm with Drew Allar, even though, he is building off of a strong season from last year. And if you're Penn State's defense, Jim Knowles is going to sell out to stop the run. He is going to be very aware that Chubba Purdy is going to try to keep the football himself, run with his legs. So stack 8 players in the box, keep 1 safety over the top, maybe even run cover 0 more often than not. How does Nevada counter that? What are you expecting from the game plan, so to speak, before we get to, a loose score prediction for this one, Chris?
Yeah, I think Nevada wants to get the ball out of Chubba Purdy's hands quickly. I think they've talked a little bit during the fall camp that they want to get their running backs the ball in space, even through the air, more so than they did last year. They do have a new offensive coordinator, Matt Lubick, who was their offensive coordinator last year, went to Kansas. David Gilbertson, who was the quarterbacks coach, but also did a lot of coordinator stuff because Matt Lubick was still recovering from leukemia, was promoted into that position. And then they have Jim Mastro, who was previously a longtime Nevada assistant coach and then had stints as an assistant at UCLA, Washington State, Oregon. He's back on the Wolfpack staff, and he helped invent the pistol offense with Chris Salt and Colin Kaepernick all those years ago, which you saw get all the way up to the NFL level. So it's going to look different for Nevada's offense. And I think the big key will be Nevada's offensive line is not going to pass protect for 4 or 5 seconds. Get that ball out quick, try and get him out in the space, and see if they can make some plays moving forward. So I think that will be what the Wolfpack wants to do. I think you're going to see a lot of 2 tight ends. I think you're going to see them try and run between the tackles and see if that works. But if not, I think the passing game is going to be very short to intermediate. I don't think you're going to see a lot of deep bombs from the Wolfpack in this game, or really throughout the majority of the season. They just don't have that kind of wide receiver core. A lot of their players at wide receiver are like 6'1" or low. Last year, they had a couple of really big guys on the edge, and they were able to use that, but that's just not the makeup of this year's wide receiver group.
All right. If you have a score prediction, Chris, you're more than welcome to share it. I'm going to go with 63-7.
Okay.
And there is a chance that this is a shutout, but if Nevada keeps its starters in there for a longer time and Penn State's going to try to cycle in some backups for the sake of the experience, I can see a drive middle to late 4th quarter where, hey, the freshmen, the second-year players, they're going to make a mistake. Chubba Purdy is eventually going to get his. So the shutout is on the table, but I do think a late score could happen for the Wolfpack. So Penn State does cover the spread. This total goes over in my mind.
So I did my game-by-game predictions. I just looked it up. I had Penn State winning 56-10. So I also have them covering. I actually got a question in my Monday mailbag about the enormity of this upset if it were to happen. It would be the biggest upset in college football history. Currently, the largest upset by betting line was Howard beating UNLV in 2017. That was 45.5 points. So that is a point higher than this spread, but that was also an FCS game, so it was an unofficial line. Here in back in the 2010s at Nevada, which had sports books and still does, obviously, but before the proliferation, there were never actually official lines for FCS games. The largest FBS versus FBS upset ever is Stanford beating USC by 40.5 points was the line in 2007. So Nobody has ever beaten a spread of 40.5 in an outright game, FBS versus FBS. So ESPN's matchup predictor does give Nevada a 1% chance of winning this game, so not the 0%. I just don't see how it happens. I think Nevada goes and it gets its $1.45 million. I think if it gets out of there healthy, I think if it gets out of there with some good film on both sides of the ball and more knowledge of the personnel it's working with, that's a win for the Wolfpack in terms of actually winning on the field. Like Lloyd Christmas said in Dumb and Dumber, you're telling me there's a chance, but it seems quite minuscule heading into this game.
Yeah, health is going to be key for both teams. Neither team wants to see a detrimental injury happen. Like you said, kind of collect that paycheck, learn something you didn't already know about yourself, and build from there. So this game kicks off at 3:30 in Beaver Stadium. This Saturday, college football is officially back. My name is Zach Seyko, your host as always. He is Chris Murray, the Nevada expert. You can check out his work over at nevadasportsnet.com. Really appreciate the time, Chris, the perspective, the expertise on this team. And here's to a safe, healthy, happy, and awesome season for you over on the Wolfpack side of things. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Once again, thank you so much for checking out another edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. We have an exciting announcement to share. It's another big moment for the Locked On Podcast Network. College football fans, Locked On and Fire TV are proud to present College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 is leading the conversation alongside two-time AP Coach of the Year, Gary Patterson, and former college star Jesse Holley, and all of Locked On's local experts. A college football preview only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, only on Fire TV.